There are tens of thousands of villages scattered through rural Indonesia. There are 33,000 registered administrative villages in the forest zone where there are meant not to be any people. They're meant to be state forests where there are no rights. And yet there's actually 33,000 villages, so millions of people living in the forests. And overall, something like 60% of Indonesians live in rural areas. So all these areas where these palm oil developments are going ahead are occupied areas. They're not empty. And the people have, of course, long made a livelihood from these areas, and indeed still do. So they have their hunting, they have their fishing, they have their rice fields, they have their shifting cultivation moving across the landscape, they trade in forest products. Some of them have very lucrative trades in fish and in fisheries, in fish tanks. In one area, there's a lot of exotic fish. But for some of them, it's true, they're not getting a lot of cash. And so this offer of roads and cash does then lure many into the palm sector. So for those communities who are surrendering their rights, often without realizing it, then what happens is that they sometimes get disappointed by what happens afterwards. They aren't getting much of a return. The small holdings may have come very late. The returns from their small holdings may be disappointing. The offer of jobs, which they thought was a big deal at the beginning, turns out to be rather disappointing because they get very poor returns from the labor, or indeed cheaper people are brought in from the other islands who are desperate to work and will work in extraordinarily poor conditions. So for many of the communities, suddenly what seemed like a wonderful thing turns into a bad thing, and then they realize, gosh, and we surrendered all our rights for this, and we've got no way back. And then the disputes erupt, particularly if it was just the leaders who signed the deal with the community members not really being aware of what was being done over their heads. And so there are conflicts. If people make appeals to the government that we're not getting what was promised, the government may not then take action. They may make appeals to the media, they get no result. They may resort to demonstrations. The company looks abashed. They may then go in for violent actions to destroy properties of the company because they're so resentful that nothing has been done. And at one moment or another in this sad kind of spectrum of actions, the companies tend to bring in the security forces to secure their properties and their investment. And then there are clashes. And this is unfortunately very frequent throughout the archipelago, that you've got these clashes over land, sometimes with firearms being used, people being shot, unfortunately sometimes also being killed, and then people being criminalized and imprisoned for their actions, some of which you would say was perfectly legitimate protest, some of which has gone a bit beyond what was prudent because they're so desperate. And so these things are pretty grim to witness, and there's lots of people who are in jail because they've been protesting about what they've realized was, to their minds now, the theft of their land under false pretenses, with false promises made of the benefits that would come. So it's an ugly scene. And beyond that, in these more longer term investments, we can see a repeated pattern that women in particular are losing out in this process. Where small holdings are being allocated, it's the male heads of household who get control of the small pieces of land they get back. Where there are jobs, it tends to be the men who get the better paying jobs. The women may get jobs as sprayers, which is using all these chemicals, and then they have problems with their pregnancies and abortions and so on. So it's very unfortunate conditions are introduced which diminish what were really surprisingly egalitarian societies, at least in Borneo.